Long Island Backstory with Chief Correspondent Gary Jacobs.
Good afternoon, I'm Gary Jacobs, and welcome to another edition of Long Island Backstory, where we're filming at the Cablevision Studios in Hauppauge, New York. Today's show is very, very important. You know, as most of you know who are regulars to watching the show, every time I do a show, I try to do something to help people. And I tell some interesting stories, and some stories are sad and happy, but you know, they're interesting, but I try to get something out of it. Today's show is so important because what we're going to talk about today can truly, truly affect people's lives and hopefully help people for the better. My guest today is Frank Shea. He's the president of Alpha Group Investigations. And a lot of people say, you know, I have my personal lawyer, my personal accountant, my personal doctor. Well, Frank is my go-to private investigator, who unfortunately I had to use during my divorce. So let me give you a little bit of background on Frank, and it was so extensive I figured I'd just write it down. I'm just going to read that so I can tell you who he is. Frank Shea has been an investigator for over 40 years. His initial investigative experience started while employed with the New York City Police Department, assigned to undercover investigations, and eventually assigned to the Brooklyn Homicide Team. The investigations included extensive background verifications, document examinations and application of law, media presentations, and press conferences with reference to the investigations that the department was doing. During the course of his career in the New York City Police Department, Mr. Shea was assigned to units that required a strong investigative nature and with detailed-oriented presentations to the district attorneys. Of course, you know, the police, they always have to present things to the district attorneys to decide whether or not they're going to prosecute or not. Upon his retirement from the New York City Police Department in 1985, Frank Shea performed investigative duties for numerous attorneys, law firms, insurance companies, and third-party administrators for self-insured companies. Mr. Shea served in the United States Marine Corps before his career with the New York City Police Department, and as I said, is the president of Alpha Group Investigations, with offices in Farmingdale, Long Island, where we are here, Hackensack, New Jersey, and Boca Raton. This group does investigations as far as they do a whole range of investigations. Some of the things they do are computer forensic accounting, surveillance, insurance defense, asset search, electronic countermeasures, missing persons, asset searches, cellular phone forensics, Title IV investigations, and what we're going to talk about today, which is matrimonial custody. And of course, a lot of those issues that we talked about go into the different custody evaluations. So Frank, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
And I've been trying to get Frank for a long time, but he's always busy. He does a lot of international work. In fact, he just flew in, I think, from Switzerland today, and he's all over the country. So I'm glad to finally get you on the show. First of all, let's talk, why would anybody need to hire a private investigator in a divorce case?
Well, the rules changed in 2010. Before 2010, it was very difficult to get a divorce in New York State. In fact, it was the last state in the country to go to no-fault divorce. And in those times, there were various acts by one party, or sometimes both, that you would need to get a divorce, such as adultery, abandonment, and it was really difficult. So they changed the laws and went to 2010 to the present, and really it's called no-fault divorce now. But I always sit down with a client who is contemplating a divorce, and I let them know it is a no-fault divorce. And if there aren't major issues on the table, really either go to a mediator and work things out, file a divorce, or go to a very good, competent divorce attorney. You don't go to a criminal attorney for a divorce.
Absolutely.
It doesn't make sense. I mean, it's the same thing if you're going for a surgery. You don't go to an orthopedic doctor to have your tooth pulled. So, and I advise them up front that they may not need the services of an investigator. Where we get retained quite frequently during a divorce is where there is an issue of child custody. It could be assets that we believe are being diverted from the marriage. New York is a 50-50 state. That's a terminology. It doesn't always work out that way. But New York's laws have really caught up with the current times. But when it comes to child custody, things can get pretty nasty, and that's where you see the worst in people. And the ones that really suffer the most are the children. And people just put that aside and they just fight and battle and spend a lot of money. And then it's really left up to a court-appointed law guardian for the child to interview the child and then to take the results of that to the court. And my experience up to the present is that your law guardians have so many cases, they probably do not have the time to handle the volume of cases they get the way they should be handled. It's not a dispersion on the law guardians. It's really a hit on the system. There's too many people needing law guardian assistance, and the state just doesn't have the money, or if it's being paid for by one of the parties in the action. You have to remember they're probably handling 30 or 40 cases.
Right.
So, we can move on from the children issue because it's obvious that that's going to be, number one, an expensive issue, but it's also not foolproof. Sometimes they get it wrong. And on occasion, you find that a family is split up, a child's mind is poisoned by one of the parties in the action, and then you also have the situation of assets. It's huge. So we do a lot of pro bono work for a large organization. I won't name the organization, but they do fabulous work. And we jump on board where we see some injustices, especially where it's a party to the action who at one time could have been living in an estate up in Brookville, and that one party and 3 kids are now living in a basement apartment and not getting any support from the person who is the breadwinner in the family, be it male or female. And this is not gender specific. There are a lot of spouses out there, making very good money, and it is, the way things are today. I mean, it's equal opportunity. I mean, you could have a woman who's making $400,000 or $500,000 a year, and her husband could be a cop in New York City making 90. So, and the reverse could be true too.
So I just want to go back a little bit to we talked about the beginning about it's a no-fault state. So originally maybe you needed to prove that the spouse was having an affair. And I tell sometimes people first of all, your advice is great. I tell people if you could stay out of court, stay out of court, because it's a lose-lose situation. But obviously sometimes you can't, and like in my case, I couldn't. But I tell people sometimes if you know your spouse is having an affair, before you file, hire a private investigator. And my advice is just keep it in your back pocket, because some people are embarrassed by it. And you need a bargaining chip sometimes. And if you have a video of, for example, your wife running around with 2 or 3 different men, and you have it on video, and you say, look, if we go to court and we have a trial, I'm going to bring in my private investigator, and I'm going to show the video, and I'm going to bring the people in. Now, you can't bring it in because of the no fault, but you could bring it in for other aspects like I did in my case, which I know you don't like to talk about private cases, but I can because it's my case. But in my case, my ex-wife was taking her boyfriend out using marital assets. So that was the auspice that I brought in. Well, look, I have proof that she's dissipating marital assets. And now, in my case, it didn't work because she didn't care if the guys were brought in. But in other cases, women say, look, I'm embarrassed. I don't want to have it's embarrassing going to court to begin with. But sometimes you need something for collateral. And sometimes I think having the person, especially if it's multiple affairs, could help the divorce. But it's not cheap. You have to decide. We do get those requests. And after if they have an attorney, I always want the attorney sitting in. Right. And this way everybody's on board. Do judges get mad when people hire a private investigator? Absolutely not. Okay. So, because I know in my case, I had a judge who kept of course my ex-wife didn't like it, and she kept making motions. I wanted to stop. And the judge didn't really love it, but he wouldn't make an order to stop it. And then there are other judges who just said, look, he has a right. He's defending himself. It's legal. Actually, judges sometimes rely on information gathered by private investigators that is, number one, accurate, number two, ethically obtained. By that I mean legally obtained. Right. And also the reputation of the
the firm.
That's
You know.
huge. That can't be understated. And I have that to talk about later, but since you brought it up, that can't be understated. A lot of people want to have their spouse followed, for whatever reason. They go, well, I'll have my friend do it.
Yes.
First of all, I don't even know if it's legal. It could be harassment. But if you go to court and say, look, I have a video that my friend followed my wife into the bar, it's not good. But if you have a reputable, in fact, in my case where your person was following my ex, she made allegations that the investigator was drinking on the job. And you would send a letter saying, hey, you guys say he's drinking? Bring it on. I am not worried about it. You have a reputation. So you have to pay the extra money to get a reputable firm, because if you get the information but you can't use it, it's out the window. And there's a lot of rules. I couldn't believe the rules I think you clock in.
Admissibility.
Right, and you could talk about that, but it's not just video. You don't walk out with a video camera. If I remember correctly, the person was clocking in the time, and then they had to come back to the office. It's not just a video. People may think, private investigator's holding this little phone out of his thing. It's pretty important.
Well, what's very important to us, as far as reputation goes, and as far as admissibility goes, is the chain of custody of evidence. In other words, an investigator may follow somebody into a bar. Our policy is you are not to drink at anything, any alcohol, nothing at all. You go up, you order a ginger ale, you order a Coke or whatever it is, put a stirrer in it, looks like you're drinking a rum and Coke. But we use very, very good equipment that is very accurate. It's time and date stamped. We'll take another shot of, let's say, a TV screen, if, let's say, the 11 o'clock news is coming on. But we'll have body cameras that are very, very good. They'll shoot in low light. And like I say, on the tape, on the video, it'll be the time and date. And you take that if the person is, let's say, drinking. We just had a case recently where a person was not supposed to be drinking by order of the court. So we followed the person into a bar, and this person went, and we counted 7 drinks, 7 alcohol, liquor drinks,
Right.
not beers, in the course of 45 minutes.
Wow.
Now you got to remember that a regular drink in a bar is about 2 ounces of liquor. I mean, it's a good shot. So that person had 14 shots.
Which is, I'm sure, illegal to drive at that point, too.
Well, the big problem is that this was on a weekend, and the person got into the car that was outside, where his 8-year-old was sitting in the back playing on one of his games.
Wow, and you have this on video.
Well, yeah, but the problem is now we have, listen, it's one thing to prove that he's drinking and violating the terms of the court order, but it's another thing to have the child in danger.
Right. You can't just watch it.
So we got myself and my chief investigator, we got a phone call right away from our field investigator, and he said 7 drinks, 45 minutes, and he's got a kid in the car. I said, did he start that car up? And he said, no. I said, call 911 immediately. I said, I said, if you have to block his car, block it. So your car.
Liability, even if you knowing that somebody's getting behind the wheel, putting the kid in danger.
Well, listen, it's beyond
just not the right thing to do, though.
You're doing the right thing.
Right.
Well, anyway, the police. This was further east on Long Island, so I guess it was a quiet Saturday, and this person, the police showed up within 2 or 3 minutes, and just thank God the guy was on his cell phone. We had our investigator go over and speak to the police and say, listen, this is what we've got. This guy cannot be drinking, can't be driving.
Right.
And he said, all right, let me make that decision. He said, well, we're leaving. But,
On you now.
And so we pulled down the road, and sure enough, the guy stumbles out of the car. He had started the car, and you don't even have to be, it doesn't even have to be started. If you're behind the wheel, that's called...
Oh, really? It's DWI?
DWI, if you're behind the wheel.
Right.
So the police officer placed him under arrest, and now it's a felony in New York State to drive with a child.
That's
in the
Leandra's
car.
law.
That's exactly it. So he was arrested for the felony. He quickly settled the divorce case. He's under supervised visitation now, which is probably good for him and the child.
Yeah, obviously the guy's probably got a problem.
Guy does have a problem.
So,
I'm just
in one part you feel bad, but you can't put the kid in danger.
I'm just hoping things work out at some point. and hopefully they do.
So I just want explain to the people that are watching the show. You can't just take these videos and bring them to court, because you have to put the person who shot the video. So it's not just you could hire somebody off the street to say, even as your company, hey, go out and videotape it. The person who shot the video has to be able to go to court and testify. So number one, that person has to be a presentable, credible person, because a lot of people can't testify. They get nervous. Number two, they have to be available, because in Suffolk County, divorces can go on for 10 years and they may move on. But if you hire a private investigator, that person has to always be available, even if they're not working for you anymore.
Well, we have a very low turnover,
Right.
thank God. But a lot of times the court will accept an affidavit.
Okay. Because they know the person's going to come in with a company. And
Oh yeah, well,
so,
our company is pretty well known, and if the judge, and I'm not saying that the judges favor what we do, they know that our work is good,
right.
And it's accurate, and it's honest.
Right.
But normally the judge will accept an affidavit that yes, this person took it. He'll sign the affidavit, or she will. We have 6 female investigators, field investigators, and my research team. We have 3 females and 2 males in the research team.
Right.
But normally the affidavit will suffice for the court.
Good.
It's very rare that they order the person.
Unless the other person maybe contests the
which is
that they didn't.
which
It'd probably be a mistake.
well, I wouldn't hire that attorney. I mean, he's asking
Right.
a question he doesn't know the answer to.
Right, exactly.
That's not a good move.
So, there's a saying when people ask me about private investigators and they say, look, I'm going through a bad divorce, but I don't really know what to get. And I used to tell them, look, you don't know what you don't know. So, and your services, it's not cheap. You have hourly wages, you have huge, big overhead with people. But if somebody has the money and they're going through a contentious divorce, I personally recommend going, and because I've sent people to you, go to a private investigator, do some forensics, maybe on the computer, maybe have them followed once or twice on a weekend. Because a lot of times I tell people, if you suspect something, probably something going on. I don't know if
we call it the gut feeling.
Okay, so a lot of people.
Yeah.
And listen, you may go for one thing and get something else.
Well, you just mentioned something. We do computer forensics, and very good computer forensics. The head of my computer forensics team is certified in over 45 different areas of computer forensics,
Right.
including cellular forensics.
Now, when you say forensics, you don't have to give the person the physical computer from your spouse, right? Or
Let's put it like this. It's got to be a family computer,
okay.
one that both parties have legal access to. What you cannot do while doing your examination, if let's say the person logs into a private, let's say AOL account, and they use a password and a login, you cannot break that password and go into their AOL account.
Okay.
That's crossing the line.
So you could only, what's on the computer you can get.
Exactly. So, and we keep it at that.
Right.
Because you could find great information concerning assets, movement of money. We've found on multiple occasions transfers of funds into new bank accounts, and it's right there for you.
Right.
So what we do is we image the computer.
Could somebody do this, like, let's say, like in my case, I went to you before I filed for divorce, because I knew once I filed, then it would be harder to get everything. And of course, that was years ago, and the forensics weren't advanced, and people didn't use computers as much as they do now. But could somebody before the divorce bring you a computer, say, hey, Frank, look, my husband's at work today, here's the computer, but I want to get it back into the house, before, and you pull the stuff off, and then you do your research, or do you have to hold on to this
We
do it?
normally will respond to the person's house. Like tomorrow I have to go up to Boston. I have a team going up to Boston tomorrow. But to make it easier on them, we take our team up, we do it right at the house. We're out of there in an hour and a half.
Oh, really? And you pull it all off right
Pull
there?
it all off. If there's a cell phone where we have legal access.
How do you get legal? I know I read that on your website. How do you get? What is legal access? If it's registered in both, what makes it a legal asset?
Well, let's say if you have a wife and 3 kids on a plan, you are the one that has the plan. Okay, you have legal access to all of those phones.
Text messages?
Absolutely, whatever's on that phone.
Well, that's to me that's
But
important, right?
to get into, let's say, an account, if it needs a password, It's not fair game.
Okay. But text messages are huge. I mean, I imagine
Huge.
you get text messages,
lot of
it
text
builds a whole story.
But a lot of these programs now, the text messages will disappear in a certain period of time.
Right. But like I know on my iPhone, it seems to save them forever.
On a text, yeah, but if, like WhatsApp, I mean.
Oh, all right. That's, yeah,
Instagram is another one.
Oh, they use that word because it disappears after a while?
Yeah,
Right.
And if you go outside the U.S., I mean, WhatsApp is probably the biggest and most widely used in the world.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a big one. So let's talk about safety issues. And again, I know you don't talk about cases, but I'll talk about in my case. Your work found that my ex-wife was putting Visine in my drinks, and that to me I was like, wow, I couldn't believe it, and I hadn't filed at the time, so I knew I had to do something, and I was very careful about things after that. And I didn't use it because I was sort of saving it in my back pocket. In my case, I just took the information, put it in my papers, and I waited till we got to a trial, hoping she would deny it. I would say, here's the proof. She knew that I had proof, so she didn't use it. But when we were talking about the Visine in my drinks, which I had never heard of, you mentioned a case that you worked on, which I think just even a week or two ago was on one of the channels I was watching, I think maybe ID TV. There was a story about you in that called the Milkshake Murders, and you told me about that. So just take a couple minutes to talk about that case, because that's a case where, unfortunately, the ending wasn't good. Yeah. But if the person listened to you, you could have saved the person's life. So talk about that case.
Yeah, there was and I can talk about that because the family has asked me to go be the face of the case. They've moved on. What it was is the head of Merrill Lynch in Asia. He was based in Hong Kong. His name was Rob Kissel. Real gentleman. And he gave us a call. He called from Hong Kong. We had been doing work for a company in Hong Kong, and they referred him to us. And upon that, he told me that he thought that his wife, Nancy Kissel, was having an affair. And we did some surveillance up in Stratton, Vermont, and after about 4 or 5 days of surveillance, he was correct. I mean, she was having an affair with a television installer or whatever. But whatever it was, he was devastated, but he wanted to get his marriage back together. So he confronted her about it when she got back to China, because she was here because of the SARS epidemic. So she and the kids were here. And when she got back to Hong Kong, she was confronted by Rob, and she admitted it. He wanted to get back together. He said, listen, I can get over this and the whole thing. And she said, all right. Well, it didn't take too much more of an investigation to figure out she was lying. I mean, we're talking upwards of 30 phone calls a day.
Right, to the boyfriend.
Yeah.
Right.
And in return.
Right.
And what we had then is a situation where Rob had to come back to New York for surgery at Lenox Hill. He had a bad back. He was only 41 or 42, but he was a sports fanatic, and that's how he banged up his back. So he was having a real tough surgery. He brought Nancy back with him, with the kids and the whole thing. His father was at the hospital. While he was being operated on, she was at a cheap hotel over in New Jersey, in Fort Lee.
Real sweetheart.
So she had 3 days of real freedom.
Right.
And I didn't tell him until after he was really able to walk down. They were staying at the Pierre Hotel. And Rob met me down in the tea room, and I told him what had gone on. And, he was really he was shaken up. So they headed back to Hong Kong. She swore to him that it would be over and the whole thing again, and of course it didn't fly. At one point, Rob called me up. It was probably about 11 o'clock New York time in the evening. And he called me up and he said, there's something going on. When I come home from work, and he had long days because he was he was in a distressed debt market, like a $4 billion deal. So he was working like 18 hours a day. What happened was she continued the affair, long distance affair at this point, but he called me up and he said, when I get home, I normally have 2 fingers of scotch. So you're looking at probably about 1.5 ounces of scotch. He said, but I'm feeling weird after it. He said, it's not right. Immediately, you know, I had problems with that. I had told him to go get a sample of his urine, have it. Now, he was a high-end person in Hong Kong, so he had to keep this quiet over there because it would have made the headlines.
Right.
So I said, send me a sample of your urine, and I want you to go to a doctor over there and get your blood taken, and I need you to have it tested. And he said, all right. Well, I never got the sample of urine. He had put it in his desk drawer and never sent it.
Because he probably didn't believe in his back of his mind that somebody was trying to kill him.
You know, well, what happened was probably about a week later, he said, really, this is still going on. I said, Rob, you got to do two things. Get to a lawyer, get to a doctor, and move out of the house. Over there's 7 people on the jury. It may be 5, but I think it's 7. And you only need, that's it, 7, you need 5 to convict.
Okay.
They were out for about an hour and came back unanimous that she was guilty of murder.
So she was poisoning, putting stuff, you were right, she was putting stuff in his...
yeah, but then she killed him. She bludgeoned him to death.
Oh, she did that after?
Well,
that knocked him out, and then she...
It was called the milkshake murders. The reason is because Sunday afternoon, he was finally getting a little rest. He was sitting in his living room, and she made a milkshake and had the kids give him the milkshake.
Wow. You talk about the international stuff. Another thing that a lot of people come to me at Americans for Legal Reform is international abduction of children, and that's something that's very difficult to find the person when they leave the state with the child, and number 2, to get them back. And I asked you before the show, and you said that that's something you assist in no matter where it is in the world. You either have affiliates or you'll put that whole thing together because people don't know where to turn.
We do not sub out any work like that. If we're going to take that case, we are in it from the beginning until the end, because I don't know who a person we're retaining as a subcontractor in, let's say, Turkey, in Istanbul, where we do a lot of business. I don't know who that person is, for the most part.
Right.
I don't know if they have the same ethics we do. And so normally what it is myself and somebody else will fly over to Istanbul. It could be London, it could be Israel, it could be Tel Aviv or Jerusalem, and follow up on our work. I have contacts when I get there to work with. So I don't speak Hebrew, number 1.
Right.
And I don't speak
local,
I don't speak Turkish.
Right.
So we do have some pretty good contacts that we'll work with.
So people can't, there is hope though. I mean, if somebody's child is internationally abducted, usually by the spouse, they can go to you and hopefully you can take them through the whole process about getting, because it's also a daunting process. People don't even know where to go.
Well,
you know,
what you're saying is correct, but I strongly recommend that they have a very good lawyer.
So they should probably either go to I mean, if you're watching this, I would say go to you, and then you tell them a lawyer that you've worked with that has, because don't go to a regular lawyer who's out here on the island, who's never done an international case with the Hague Convention. It's way too complex.
Once you get into the international arena, the demographics change with the case. I mean, if let's say, I'm going to use Israel for an example. If let's say somebody takes the children and goes to Israel. Now, Israel is very protective of their citizens, okay? And it's very difficult to work out a deal to get the child back, even if the person took the kids illegally. Now, yeah, that could go to the court of The Hague, but are you going to succeed getting them back? It's a flip of a coin.
Right. But at least you have a shot. People, there is some hope, but it's expensive. And
we find that Canada is very open to a legal return of the children.
Right.
In other words, that the kids were taken illegally.
Right.
Canada is very good to work with. Mexico, believe it or not, is very good.
Right.
There are other countries where it's a battle.
Right. So you know how to handle it politically.
Well, it's not only politically, but it's also the connections and them finding out for themselves that you are legitimate.
Great, Frank, thanks so much for coming on the
You're
show.
welcome.
We're out of time. I had a lot more things to go over. If you want more information, Frank's got a website, Alpha Group Investigations.
It's Alpha GP.
Alpha GP, okay. And also you're on Facebook as well, or just the internet?
Facebook is really for my family.
Okay. So Facebook, you know that that's how everybody gets in trouble too. So that probably brings you a lot of business too, right?
I won't
Doing some
comment on that.
investigations on Facebook. Thank everybody for joining us. If you like what you see, please go to YouTube and subscribe to our channel so you get notified every time we put a show online. Thank you very much, and we'll see everybody next week.
Gary Jacobs and Long Island Backstory, winner of the Huntington Lodge No. 124's 2018 Community Service Award in recognition of the efforts to offer an alternative access to news stories of interest to all Long Islanders.